Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough, and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
I am so excited about our guest today, Ken Thomas with Connect Ministries, and he puts a big emphasis and focus on camp. And I believe camp is like the crown jewel of kids and student ministry in so many ways. The opportunities that it presents to be able to share the gospel and to truly disciple kids and share the good news over the course of many days. You know, it's amazing what God can do when you get them out of their element for a little while and they turn their hearts and minds totally on his focus. But
it is. I'm going to push back on one of your comments though, Josh. You know, it's a crown jewel of reaching kids, and you said into disciple kids. I think it may be the start of the discipleship journey. It's just hard to go, oh, well, we're going to disciple them in 5 days or 6 days or 7 days. And we've seen where kids go away to camp, they come back so excited only to have it fall flat because the discipleship was not followed through back at the local church. And so I want to just remind people that when we have high energy events, that's not that end all. It's not that be all. That it's got to be that ongoing, let camp be that launch pad, if you would. Is that a better framework? Because it does launch them into discipleship for sure. And I didn't mean to just kind of step in and correct. I know what you meant on that, but I wanted to remind people that a phrase we use often, discipleship's not an event, and camps are an event, church services are an event, but discipleship is that everyday way of life.
I agree 100%. We actually, most of our leaders that go to these camps, that's what we push. We just got back from camp this week, and that's probably part of my excitement. But I've already seen kids. We've had our middle schoolers meeting in 3 different homes over the course of the last week from coming home from camp to do Bible studies. And our leaders are opening up their homes, and these kids don't want to wait till Sunday or Wednesday. They want to be already in. So
that's the follow-up. That's it.
That's the win.
That's the win for sure.
I think the common thread, as we've been listening to multiple podcasts over the last several weeks, is the relational equity piece and just the value in building relationships and using camps as an opportunity to build relationships, and from there have a strategy for discipleship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's going to push our comfort zone a little bit, or at least he pushed mine, maybe not all of ours, but he pushed my comfort zone. I can get involved in discipleship so easy. That's my comfort zone. But intentionally talking to other people and introducing the gospel, I can bring it up, but I don't step into it as often as I need to. I don't step into it as frequently as I do with strangers. And of course, he talks more about the people who we do begin to find that relational equity or building it in the moment when we meet somebody. And, as an introvert, that just doesn't come natural to me, but I'm not excused from it. Do both of you, find that comfort? Both of you are extroverts. You help balance me out on this podcast. How do you feel when you meet somebody you don't know really well? And you're trying to bring the gospel back? I know you do. You have instant friends, both of you. But does the gospel come up in the first 10 minutes of the conversation or 30 minutes? Or where does it come up for you?
Usually it comes up pretty quick. And I've really worked hard at not letting the role that my husband holds in the church be what I lead with. It's very easy to kind of have a gospel conversation and I'll just tell you guys, we're living in a time where I don't always want to lead with that because I want them to hear that the gospel is really about relationship and rescuing, and not so much about all the negative connotations that are getting attached to quote unquote the church these days. And my husband works for one. So it's just, but I try to press in to listen to their family dynamics. And then I think asking good questions is a good segue into gospel conversations. I mean, Ron, to be honest with you, I know you're an introvert, but you're an incredible question asker. And I think that's really what families and people in general, they want to be heard, and they want us to listen to their story. So I think the engagement and the relational equity, as we begin talking about this, as we connect in community, is that we ask good questions and we really listen. And I think that's what I was challenged by through this podcast.
Yeah, it comes very natural for me, but I really I try to hide the fact that I'm a pastor for most people, whether it's at a restaurant or whatever, because most of the time when they hear that, they want to chew their arm off to get away from me, if they're trapped. And I like to almost end with that, like, oh, wow, I would have never guessed that, just to love and listen, right.
I think there's wisdom that way. You can certainly connect. Well, I tell you what, I want to keep debriefing, but let's listen to what Ken has to share with us, and we'll debrief on the other side of this a little bit more.
We all need a reset from time to time. When disruption comes, the shock, confusion, and stress can often cause leaders to misjudge priorities. Coming out of a crisis requires us to evaluate what has changed and what we should do to move forward. That's why we chose the theme Reset for the upcoming D6 conference. We want to help you not only value the past, but also look forward, and equally important, take the time to properly evaluate without making hasty predictions. In a culture marked by generational challenges and conflicts, ministry leaders, parents, and volunteers need solid resources to help them navigate a complex and ever-changing terrain. Whether you're a parent or a leader or both, at the 2022 D6 Conference, you'll have the opportunity to plan your discipleship strategy and be equipped and empowered with invaluable tools and resources. Join us April 20th through the 22nd in Orlando, Florida, as we come together to reset, refocus, and reconnect as ministry leaders, parents, and volunteers. The D6 Conference is the family ministry conference for your entire team. Register today and save at d6conference.com.
Ken Thomas graduated from the University of Georgia with a Bachelor of Science in Education and from Southwestern Theological Seminary with a Master's of Divinity. He then earned a Doctorate of Education from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Today, he combines his great education with his passion for teaching, equipping, and leading to help churches meet new people. Ken now serves as president of Connect Ministries, and Ken and his wife Norma have 3 children. Ken, thanks for being here today.
Hey, it's good to be here, David.
Well, we're talking today about how the church can connect with new families, and I was checking out Connect Ministries and just really intrigued by what you guys do. It seems very, very cool, very practical, very needed in today's society, and I love that it's this unique ministry, and yet it has a strong gospel purpose. Can you talk a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Well, Connect Ministries started in 2006. And Gabe Norris, who helped co-found Connect Ministries with me, we both had a real deep burden to see the church in America get outside of its walls and meet new people. We were a part of a new church start, and it was in South Nashville at the time where our families lived, Rolling Hills Community Church in Franklin, Tennessee, and it was an infant little church at that point. It's a growing, thriving church, multi-site church now, but back then it was just getting started. And we realized just how hard it is for churches in America to meet new people. And I mean people who aren't thinking about Christ, people who have no orientation towards church, and it's difficult. It's not easy. The church and the community in many ways operate independently of each other, and the two very rarely intersect. And so God really, over a course of a couple years, burdened both of our hearts with this reality that, man, it is not getting any easier for the church to meet new people. They don't just usually stumble into your building. And so we felt led to start a ministry that would focus completely on that and helping the church get outside their walls and meet new people. And so we're 15 years into it now, and we've seen God do some really amazing things in the lives of churches and people, and man, it's been exciting.
Has the pandemic played a role in what you guys have done and your techniques? And
Yeah, absolutely. All of us have been challenged with these last 12 months as it relates to the pandemic. How do you adjust your strategy? Basically, how do you not adjust it, but how do you change it? And one of the things that we've done over these years is we've taken day camps to communities as an effective strategy to help the church meet new people. And as you know, and all that are listening here know, there was very little camp activity happening in the summer of 2020.
Yeah.
And while that's not the only thing Connect Ministries does, we do a lot of other things, but that is one of the primary things, Connect Camps. Well, it didn't happen in 2020, and so we ran a new play, if you will, to try to help churches just for that summer. We called it Camp in a Box, but it was quite different, not what any of us had in mind for 2020. But that plan did change drastically as all of us had to really pivot.
Yeah, well, luckily we're at a point now where I think we're kind of crawling out of the pandemic. I don't think we're running out of it, but we're kind of getting there, and things are getting somewhat back to normal. I'll be honest, as an introvert, something that's really tough for me is to invite people to church because I'm worried what they're thinking, what they're going to think about me. And my assumption is that they just won't want to come, that just rejection is going to be an automatic. Am I right with that assumption, or are you saying that people are more willing to attend than one might think?
No, I think you're correct. I think that there is an openness to come to church. However, it's really based off what we've seen over these 15 years. It's based off relationships. The person who, let's say, the family who maybe is very reputable in the community, they know a lot of people in the community, they're doing good things, but they're not connected to a church in any way. The chances of them getting up on a Sunday morning or even at any point during the week and say, hey, I think I'll just drop by the church and go to church this morning, it's very rare. In fact, Barna releases stats that it's 2018, so I don't think these numbers have changed much. About 156 million unchurched people in America today.
Wow.
The number's grown drastically since 1990 when he did the same research. Not only that, every generation alive today is on a decline when it comes to church attendance. So if you think about that, every generation alive, okay, that means families with young children, they're the least likely. In fact, only 20% of millennials today believe that church attendance is even important. Okay, so now back to your question. Will people come? Or should I be nervous about inviting somebody? Well, if you have a relationship with them and you've had the opportunity to build a relationship with them, they're more likely to come and take you up on your invitation because they don't want to go to a place where they don't know anybody. They don't want to go to a place where they don't understand the lingo. They don't understand that some of our churches aren't marked very well. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to park. How many of us would go to an environment like that and put our children in a situation where they're going to feel uncomfortable too? And the answer to that question is not many of us.
Yeah.
However, if we've built a relationship with them, they're more likely, and it becomes less uncomfortable for us as believers to invite them to join us, whether that be in a small group setting or whether that becomes to a large group setting. So my answer would be, it's probably not surprising, it's about relationships. And we've seen that happen through Connect Camps. where churches build relationships with the children and they build relationships with the parents by earning their trust throughout the week in a pretty in a very easy way through a camp. Camp is fun, and they earn that. They build a little bit of relationship collateral, and the families are a little more likely to accept that invitation should we be so bold as to say, why don't you join us on Sunday?
Are you saying, is it the bigger challenge for churches? Is it getting them to actually attend the church, or is it keeping them once they actually step foot?
Well, yeah, great question. It's both. I mean, you got to get them there. They're not coming on their own. Statistics clearly show that. Only maybe 18% of those who visit for one time ever come back. But if you can get them to come the second time, statistics show that about 80% will return if you can get them to come for the second visit to your church.
Wow.
So it begins, major jump in your numbers. Now, when you think of it that way, then that impacts your strategy, right? Okay, so if we can get them to come one time, what do we have to do in our strategy to see them back a second time? Because the numbers tell us if they come back a second time, 80% chance they'll come back a third and a fourth and a fifth. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be like they come this Sunday, then we see them next Sunday. But it may mean they come the first time, and then all of a sudden the second or third time, maybe a few weeks later. So what do we do in our strategy to make sure that second, third, and fourth visit actually happens? So that's the challenge when we have to think about our strategy. Where are the gaps in our strategy that prevent someone from saying, okay, I think I'll try that again?
Yeah, I'm thinking in my head that 18 to 80 jump. That's just incredible. I mean, those numbers are just crazy. But yeah, that does affect strategy. Now, I want to ask you, once a church makes that contact with a new family, what should be the next step?
Well, you're probably already recognizing I'm a strategy fellow. I really believe it revolves around strategy. And a mistake that I've seen as it relates to this question has been that many of us have this thought that follow-up begins once they visit our church. And actually, I would suggest, I think that's a myth. I don't think that's true at all. I think follow-up begins well before someone ever steps in our door. And you might say, well, how do we follow up with someone that we've never met? The reality of it is you have to build a strategy before you ever meet whoever this person is or this family is that comes in your church, well before the event. And there's so many different checkpoints that have to be in place so that when they come, the follow-up part is actually the natural flow of what happens. There's no silver bullet. There's no, hey, if you do this one thing, then, man, you're going to get them back. I wish it was that easy.
Yeah.
But the mistake that I've seen, and you've probably seen it too, David, is that many of us don't think about follow-up until we've either done the event or we've either done the activity or we've either had the Sunday morning, and now we've got X number of people to, quote, follow up with, but we really didn't have our plan set in motion on the front side of that. So it goes back to strategy to me, and building a comprehensive strategy that involves multiple touch points beyond just an email or a letter in the mail. I like to think of it as finding out as much information through good processes on the front end about those who are in your community, so that when they show up, you'll know what their interests are, and when they come and they see what you're doing, they'll say, that actually is something that would really help my family. And when they feel that way, they're more likely to stay engaged with you. But it's a comprehensive strategy that starts well before the event, creates a tremendous amount of intentionality for that process to really happen.
Yeah, and I want to stay there on that follow-up component for a second, because with ministry having so many components, it's so easy for people to fall through the cracks. Maybe they come a few times and they don't come again, and we don't realize it till months down the road. What are some strategies, some practical strategies that you've implemented or you've seen done that can actually help prevent that from happening?
Yeah, well, you're right. Ministry is multifaceted. there's a lot of different things that our churches are offering families. And because of that, I think there has to be tremendous alignment throughout your organization. For example, let's say that as a family pastor, or maybe a children's pastor, youth minister, whatever my role may be, I may have thought through our whole strategy for following up with families, right? But I've created that strategy as a youth minister, but I've not really communicated with my children's pastor about that, or I've not communicated with the family pastor, or the senior pastor may be thinking something differently. And what could happen is that you've got a lot of good ideas that are not aligned with one another. Now think about this. If the church staff is not aligned in their strategy of here's how we go about assimilating families into our church, but let's say there's multiple ways that we do that and they're not all aligned, how hard then is it going to be for our volunteers who are not there every hour of the week to know exactly what our strategy is? So now all of a sudden you have volunteers in an organization that don't understand what we're trying to do in the end game with a new family who comes into our church. So then these families fall through the cracks because our volunteers are saying one thing, our staff is saying another thing, and through all of that, they're not provided with clear pathway as to what we're trying to do. And so I really go back to alignment. Are you aligned? Is your church staff and your paid staff aligned with your volunteers? Do your volunteers know what we're trying to do and how we do it? I referred to Rolling Hills Community Church just a few minutes ago, but I'll tell you an example that maybe provides some, make you think just a little bit. I remember being a part of Rolling Hills in the early days as a church start, and Jeff Simmons, who still is the pastor there, was really, I would say, excellent at finding out where new families' interests were. And you may come in and walk in at that time we were meeting in a movie theater. You may walk in and all of a sudden you meet Jeff, and within the first 3 or 4 minutes, he's found out what you're interested in, what your wife is interested in, what your children are interested in. He didn't do it in a creepy way. Right? He just found out. And before you knew it, you were standing beside somebody who was already a part of the church who had those same interests. And all of a sudden you were invited in to what they were interested in, and it created a natural connection point. Now, was that by accident? It was not. It was by strategic planning that happened. And what he taught all of us is how to do the same thing, so that our church staff was trying to find out what people were interested in so we could plug them in, and so were all the volunteers. And when you have that kind of alignment, alignment like that creates tremendous momentum. And when momentum starts, it's kind of hard to slow down.
Yeah. I love that example because it goes back to that idea of relationships that you mentioned at the beginning. As we kind of wrap up, are there any other success stories that just really stand out to you where you say, this was implemented, the strategy was used, and it worked?
Yes. Well, over these 15 years, Connect Ministries has done, we've done 5K races and half marathons, and we've done big 3-on-3 basketball tournaments, all with the purpose of just trying to help the church meet new people, right? Build relationships so that you can introduce them to the person of Christ and assimilate them into your church. But for sure, our big, if you want to say our biggest success stories, I don't know how you qualify one as bigger than the other when a life has changed for Christ. But for sure, the biggest thing we've done over these years is done camp. And Connect camps, we've seen literally over 200,000 campers through these 15 years. And in that process, I think about children's pastors who have invited us to their community to do a camp. And I think of one particular community where it was one church that we were working with, and then we encouraged them to talk with a few other churches about joining them as a partnering church. And now 15 years later, there's over a dozen churches of different denominations working together to make a big community impact and share the message of Christ with boys and girls of different ethnic backgrounds, different denominations. And not only do they work together to bring camp there, but they also work together throughout the year now, and they meet monthly, and they're planning things, realizing if they pull their resources together, they can have a really big kingdom impact in their community. And that's one. I think about the young girl. This story could be multiplied by literally the thousands. But I think about the young camper we had one time in Texas who accepted Christ and whose mom and dad weren't connected to a church at all. And she accepted Christ while she was at camp. She was only there because her parents needed somewhere for her to be while they worked. And all of a sudden she comes, she hears the message of Christ. Her dad is like, what is this that you're doing? And I want to know more about it. And within the next week, he accepted Christ, and he and his daughter were baptized together there on a Sunday morning. Man, we've seen God use Connect camps in some unbelievable ways to change the hearts of families and change the hearts of campers for him. And we're really blessed by that, excited, David, that this summer we'll be able to do camp in communities again and see all that God could do when we just step into the middle of the community and partner with churches.
Very cool. Well, I love what Connect Ministries is doing. It's very forward-thinking, very gospel-centered, just a very cool thing to do that's helping so many churches out there and helping so many people. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate you sharing about this and just giving us some great ideas of what we can use in our churches.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, David. Appreciate you allowing us to be here.
Splink is a simple way to help families in your church link together spiritually. It comes as a free weekly email with ideas that parents can use to have fun, make memories, and talk with their kids. Those teachable moments give moms and dads opportunity to share spiritual truths and life lessons. And no matter how busy life is, there's always time to Splink. Share d6family.com with the parents in your ministry so they can sign up today to start receiving free weekly Splink.
Well, I am so thankful for Mr. Ken's perspective and wisdom. I think one of the things that I walked away with and I'm challenged with is he said, you can keep them when they come a second time. And I wrote second time on a Post-it note. Post-it notes, you guys have heard me talk about the value of Post-it notes in my life. And when there's truths and leadership principles and scriptures that God wants me to sit with, I write it on a Post-it note and stick it on my computer. And that's just a really good Post-it note perspective as a ministry leader, second time.
That percentage blew me away. Did it not you?
The 18% to the 80%, the 18 to the 80, yeah. That is a dramatic and drastic shift. And I love that he kind of left, he kind of stepped on our toes of what is the gap?
Yes.
Between the 18 and the 80, what is the gap? And that is where we've got to evaluate as ministry leaders and as parents and individuals, as influencers for the gospel. It doesn't really matter where we land there, but that we've got to really think about what is the issue with the gap there.
That's right. That's right. One of my other items, in addition to the gap and that 18% versus 80% that he hit towards the end, he said, "Is your staff aligned with your volunteers?" Yes. And I rephrased the question again and said, because I try to remind ourselves that not everybody listening to our podcast has staff. And so my question is, are our volunteers in our church aligned with the pastor's vision? And alignment is a big deal inside family ministry to get people on the same page, not only in the work of the church, but in the work of discipleship when we're not at church, making those intentional connections. That's the heart of D6 or Deuteronomy 6 from Scripture. And so I love that alignment. So maybe look at your church and ask yourself, are our volunteers bought into our mission and purpose? Do they understand what we're supposed to be doing on Sunday? Do we have intentional talking points and connection points like Ken has talked about? I think that would be super, super valuable in there for us.
And
absolutely.
And just as important is not just understanding and knowing and understanding the vision, but are we living it out? Because sometimes we can be, get in the habit of Sunday mornings, even just talking to the people that we know. And hanging out in our our clicks and connecting and missing those new first time guests, as we talk about, getting those second timers. And we have a saying that we've adopted from Andy Stanley. It's like, hey, what happens in our halls trumps what hangs on our walls. We have to live out the vision, and we have to keep our eyes open for those first time people, for those new guests, and not just talk about them and have it be all about them on the wall, but in the hallway we're not connecting with them. So we have made a purposeful effort to try to remind our volunteers, hey, we know you're going to connect with each other anyway. Let's keep our eyes open for those that may not have anybody this week.
I love that. We walk away just so challenged by Ken's perspective. I want to just kind of end on the thought that he said that follow-up begins before they step in the door. I think we need to end on that note. We need to be thinking strategically before they even enter the door. And so we just want you to know we are praying for you. We are looking forward to our next week. Our next guest is Miss Nikki Koziars, and she is part of Proverbs 31 Ministries. And you guys, I am so excited about this interview. She's also authored a new book called Flooded. Her perspective of Noah will leave you definitely challenged and inspired. And so we are looking forward to what God has for us next week. And we will see you soon.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.